Today we're going to talk about coffee cake, and I need to make a very important distinction right at the start. This is British coffee cake, and it's not because I have some weird patriotism, it's because in this country, coffee cake tastes of coffee. In America, coffee cake is just a bland cake that you eat with coffee. I don't understand. What do you call cake that tastes of coffee? So we're going to do the British one, the one that actually tastes of coffee. How good can you get this to taste? This is the quest that I'm on today. Now, I'm not a baker. I'm not a professional chef of any kind. I'm a passionate enthusiast of all things cooking and food, but know this going in, I am not a pro baker. As I did my research for this, there were a couple of things to note. Almost all the recipes were a coffee and walnut cake. For now, we're just going to pay attention to the coffee. And that's kind of the second point. In none of the recipes that I read did anyone really particularly care about the coffee that went in. They just used instant coffee or specified instant espresso powder or something like that, but no one really cared about the coffee flavor. And that's what we do here. We care about coffee flavor. So the first thing we're going to do is actually look at the difference between using regular cheap instant and specialty instant. I'm going to bake two different sponges, one with good instant, one with, let's just call it bad instant, and see if we can taste the difference. Now, as a baseline recipe for the cake, I'm going to go to Felicity Cloak. She wrote a column in The Guardian where she would just cook everyone else's recipes, work out what she liked and didn't, and then synthesize them into kind of one perfect little recipe at the end. But as a little twist, I'm going to do it slightly differently. So I'm going to go for more of a kind of sponge cake texture where you cream the butter and sugar, you add your egg yolks to that, and then your flour to that. But separately, you beat your egg whites and sugar together to get a kind of meringue phase going, and you incorporate that as kind of part of the aeration phase to get a lighter, fluffier end result. Let's do that. Let's get on with that. I'll walk you through what I'm doing, and we'll bake good instant versus bad instant. So this recipe for a single sponge cake starts with 60 grams of golden caster sugar, 112 grams of unsalted softened butter, and you cream them together at high speed for 5 or 6 minutes until fluffy, scraping down the sides as necessary. We're going to add 2 egg yolks, but one at a time and mixing completely before adding the second one. And then with the mixer on low, we're going to add 112 grams of flour and 7 grams of baking powder and mix until just combined. Then we're going to add 5 grams of instant coffee, dissolved in 20 to 30 grams of water and allowed to cool. Now, in a clean bowl, we're going to add 2 egg whites, 62 grams of golden caster sugar, and 2 grams of salt. We're going to whip it on high until you've got pretty stiff peaks forming in the meringue. Fold the meringue into the batter, about a third at a time, and just gently mix until fully combined. Grease and flour a springform cake pan and add your batter. Bake at 175 Celsius for about 25 minutes or until the internal temperature reaches 96 degrees Celsius. Give the cake a good hard tap on the counter when you take it out of the oven to assist with cooling, let it cool down, and I'll do everything again, but this time using some specialty instant, in this case from the lovely people at 3FE in Dublin. So we've got 2 sponges here and they look pretty much the same. They baked similar amounts of time, technique-wise the same. The only difference really is the instant inside them. So how does that make them taste different? Now, I'm not going to lie to you. Baking this thing with the Nescafe, and it still smelled pretty good. Now, this smelled great too, but once you add a good amount of fat and a good amount of sugar, you're going to mask a fair bit of coffee flavor, and that might work in Nescafe's favor. I don't think it's going to taste better, but it might not taste as bad as you'd think. Let's get into it. Okay, it starts out okay, then you get that kind of very Nescafe kick at the back end of it. The flavor's not very strong, but let's try the specialty instant. No real surprise, but that is much better. Still not a ton of coffee flavor though. I should double check. I mean, it's good. It's way better than the Nescafe. It's definitely an upgrade, but I want more coffee flavor. And I can't help but wonder, why can't I use fresh coffee? Why can't I pull shots of espresso? If many typical bakers were pulling shots of espresso on most home setups, well, if you see how espresso is presented by even food YouTube, they're going to be pulling much weaker, larger shots, adding a lot more liquid to the batter, and probably not having great results. But if I can pull good espresso, a strong espresso, delicious, well-balanced espresso, can I have a better result? Now, this cake had about 5 grams of instant coffee in it. This one had about 6.5 grams, because typically, in my experience, specialty instant needs a higher dose when even making coffee out of it or anything else. It doesn't seem to have quite the same purity, I guess, when it comes to soluble material as commercial instant. But neither of them have quite enough coffee flavor. So I'm going to need more. So if I want 9 grams, let's say, of soluble material, I'm going to need to pull 90 grams of 10% espresso. That may ruin the batter, that may destroy the cake structure, but there's only one way to find out. It's time to add the coffee, and I've got about 110 grams of espresso here. It's more than I need, but it should be about 10% strength. If I've done a good job extracting it, it was just over 2:1 as an espresso ratio, but I would say with some confidence, we're at about 10%. And then this, seems like a lot of liquid now, we'll add to this portion of the batter. So I would say the batter feels a little bit wetter, but not a lot. But I'm aware baking is a kind of alchemy and precision is everything. So I just don't know both what the additional liquid will do, plus the additional acidity. Acidity does play a role in cake structure. The acidity of espresso may mess everything up. Let's find out. So I'm just going to check the temperature, 22 minutes in. 89.2 is maybe 2 or 3 degrees cooler than last time, so I'm going to let it bake for maybe another 5 minutes and check in, see how the temperature is then. Gotta say, smells fantastic, but we'll let it cool down patiently, then we'll give it a taste. It's time for the final taste test, and you might notice this has been a bit more depleted. It's important to do thorough testing, but let's get into the latest cake, see what we get. So let me taste a benchmark, which we agreed, well, I agreed, was delicious. Still very good cake, not too much intensity of flavour. Now this cake looks much darker. Is that from more coffee flavor, I wonder? That is good. It was very good. That is so much better than I thought it was going to be. That is everything warm and comforting and friendly about coffee, everything you want coffee to be in a sweet thing. That is delicious. That is great. I have no idea why people aren't adding well-brewed espresso to this recipe. It's really good. I'm really happy with this. I think this is a really great coffee sponge to go into a coffee cake. But I can't help but wonder, how could this be better? I'm at the upper limits of my skill set and my knowledge around baking. What if there's more? There has to be more. I need a smarter person than me. I need a more knowledgeable person than me. And when it comes to food and food science, I have someone in mind. Now, when it comes to food science and cooking, no channel has had more influence on the way that I cook and think than Chef Steps. Grant Crilly is a co-founder of Chef Steps and an incredibly talented chef, and he just knows way too much about everything cake science related. So I sent him a text asking for some suggestions, and he had a couple, one of which did involve sourcing flour that is banned in the EU and the UK, so I thought I'd probably pass on that. But I was intrigued by GMS. It stands for Glycerol Monosterate and is usually sold as a sports supplement that helps with hydration. However, commercial bakers have been using it as an emulsifier, and it's a cheap and healthy enough addition to the cake that should improve its texture. It isn't essential for the recipe if you don't want to include it, but I think it is a pretty interesting and cheap upgrade for baking at home. As you can tell from the costume change, this video has been going on for some days now. Now it's time, before we do the final sponges and do that kind of final mix of the cake, to talk about buttercream. Now the original recipe that I worked from, the one from the Guardian newspaper, did the most basic form of buttercream, which is just butter and powdered sugar whipped together. I don't love that. It's just me. I just find the amount of sugar you have to just have no kind of greasiness is just too high. It's too sweet. It's just not what I'm into. So I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to go a Swiss meringue buttercream. And when it comes to this sort of stuff, there's no point lying. I would take all my advice from Stella Parks, aka Brave Tart. So this recipe is somewhat based on her Swiss meringue buttercream. Now for the coffee flavoring in the buttercream, this was really interesting. In trying to create an ultimate recipe, you have to remember that's not the most coffee flavor possible, it's the best coffee flavor possible. And in various trials, it was really easy for the buttercream to just dominate the taste of the sponge. And that cake tastes delicious. It tastes interesting, it tastes of good coffee. And smothering that with the buttercream, well, it wasn't a success. It wasn't the ultimate. It had more coffee flavor, but it wasn't the best. So here we are going to get some coffee flavor into the buttercream, but it's going to be gentle. And to do that, we're going to make coffee butter, which is not like a nut butter. We are going to infuse unsalted butter with coffee. Now, I think this recipe, I'm taking it from the Chef Steps website, it might have stemmed from the time that I spent with Chris Young, a co-founder of Chef Steps, when he was at Heston Blumenthal's Fat Duck lab, and we did a bunch of experiments back then on infusing coffee into oils. And the results were very interesting. You get a different kind of flavor profile from the coffee than you do infusing into water because different compounds are fat soluble than water soluble. So here I'm going to take 100 grams of coffee and 200 grams of butter. As for the infusion process, if you have a sous vide circulator, like this or any other one, you can use that, and it's quite easy. We're going to infuse at 90 degrees Celsius for about an hour only. Their recipe is 3 hours at 90 C. We're going to do 1 hour at 90 C. I just want a little bit less of an infusion here. We are going to use whole beans, and that seems insane because why would you not grind them? But I need to be able to remove every speck of coffee for this from a texture perspective. I don't want any bits in my buttercream later, so whole beans it is. And the infusion works still really very well. If you don't have a circulator, you can just get a pot, put the butter in it, melt it, and cook the coffee beans in the butter, but be careful to keep the temperature below the point at which your moisture will start to boil out, and certainly below temperatures where you'd start to brown that butter. So after it's infused, be it on the hob or through a sous vide, you want to strain it out, and we've got some coffee-infused butter. Confusingly, I'm making this butter quite late in the video, but in the real world, if I was baking this cake, this would be the first thing I would do. The reason being, I need to put this in the fridge, so it chills down again, and then actually bring it out of the fridge before I use it, so it's around 18 degrees Celsius. I don't want it room temp, I don't want it cold, I want it softening for the next phase. Now, the rest of this recipe is pretty much from Stella Parks, and it's linked down below. We're going to mix 85 grams of egg whites from 2 or 3 eggs with 155 grams of plain sugar. I'm using powdered here because I had some left over from previous tests. Heat this in a bain-marie setup until the mixture reaches 85 degrees Celsius, and then whip it on high for around 10 minutes until the meringue is glossy and stiff and the temperature is around 32 Celsius. With the mixer running, we're going to add 100 grams of coffee butter and then 180 grams of unsalted butter, but only about a tablespoon at a time, making sure it's fully incorporated in. In our case, we're going to put it into a piping bag because it's time to finish the cake. It's nearly time to put together the last sort of steps, make those final sponges, and build this thing. But first, there's 2 things to talk about. One, this video has a sponsor, which means it has a giveaway. I'm giving away 5 grinders every sponsored video, 5 Baratza Encores. If you are down on your luck, if life is hard, if you can't afford a grinder and it would make a real difference to your life, enter down below. It's free to enter and open to anyone in any of the 39 countries that we're able to ship to and warranty the grinders in. If you can afford a grinder, please don't enter. Please buy a grinder from a local business. They need your help right now. And this is possible because this video has a sponsor. It's sponsored by Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN that is fast, easy to use, and jam-packed with features. A VPN is super useful these days because loads of us spend a lot of time watching content from all around the world. And one of the advantages of a VPN is that you can access geo-restricted content. If I was in the US, I wouldn't be able to watch BBC iPlayer, but using a VPN, I could, and it will unlock content on services like Netflix where you can check out different shows in different parts of the world that would be restricted for you where you are. Surfshark is a great VPN service, but more than that, it lets you use unlimited devices for one single subscription. There is 24/7 live customer support, there is a 30-day money-back guarantee, and in terms of your data, they don't keep logs. If you want to check it out, go to surfshark.deals/James Hoffman and enter code James Hoffman for 84% off and 4 months free. That is a fantastic deal, and I'm very grateful to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. So we're into the final stretch. We've worked out what we want the ultimate coffee cake to be, the most delicious coffee flavored cake we can make. I've got my buttercream frosting done. I just need to make the 2 sponges. I'm just going for a 2-tier cake because 3 can be a little bit too much. 2 tiers is good. Put it together, and I just really want to eat it. I can't wait. Let's go. So this final batch, we're making 2 sponges, so doubling all the ingredients, but the process is the same. We're going to add 6 grams of GMS. Once that's mixed in, I found the best way from here was to add about half of the espresso and then about half of the flour, then the rest of the espresso and the rest of the flour, making sure to mix on low very gently until pretty much incorporated. Split the batter evenly between the 2 tins. If it helps you, you want at least 480 grams of batter in each one, and then bake at 175 for 25 minutes or until you hit that internal temperature of 96 degrees Celsius. Sponges, done, cooled. The cooler the better. If you have no patience like me, tough, try and let them cool completely, and then we're going to frost them up. Now, as I said before, we want a delicate touch here. Now, this is another important point. I'm not a baker of any kind. I don't know what I'm doing with frosting. I don't make beautiful looking cakes. I want delicious cakes. Now, if you're good at frosting stuff, you're going to feel very superior to me in the next second, but I don't really mind too much. I don't like the idea of there being a barrier to entry. This should be fun and delicious and beautiful after that. So, thin layer of frosting on here I'm going to pipe on. Second tier on top, thin layer on top. I'm going in a not generous way here. And then we should have balance, texture, tons of coffee flavor. I'm excited to taste what the GMS has done to the texture as well, so let's get on with it. You may mock me for my cake decorating skills in the comments. I'm actually okay with that. I think the phrase you're looking for is rustic, but it's not about the look, it's about the eating. It's time to get into this thing. It's time for the all-important taste test. I didn't garnish this because what? I'm going to put coffee beans on top? I'm not going to lie. Saying that this is the best coffee cake I've ever had clears a low bar because historically these have never been very good. This is delicious. The coffee is clean and sweet. It tastes like good coffee went into it. There's just enough buttercream frosting just to make it a little bit softer and richer. But the sponge is the star of the show. That is a great cake. That is what you want coffee to be when it turns up in desserts, when it turns up in other things. You want coffee to show off what it's good at, not be this generic, dull, slightly bitter, brown taste. You want it to be the things you love about coffee. And that's what this does. This tastes like good coffee. Not just coffee, but it tastes like good coffee. The contrast in kind of coffee flavors between the buttercream and that kind of oil infusion of flavors and the sponge is really interesting. It's a very complete spectrum of flavor. You probably wouldn't get the nuance of an interesting coffee from, Ethiopia, or probably not worth putting a geisha in here either. But something clean, sweet, and delicious, brewed as espresso, pulled strong, turned into a yummy cake. Please make this. Please let me know how you go down in the comments below. Please share pictures if you know how to actually frost a cake in a way that looks good. I would love to see it. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.